Force. And just to give you a little background, very briefly, the Housing Task Force purpose is to inform and engage our members across the state to promote collective actions around housing issues as they align with our position. By increasing understanding and importance of the issue through education, the task force hopes to influence public policy and legislation at all levels through advocacy while speaking with one league voice. And this evening we have, and you may know these people, but we have Andrea Wilkins, who's the league's legislative liaison. We have our legislative action committee members here with us this evening, Kathy Smith and Joe Federer and Kate Van Houten. So they work very closely following the legislation and informing the rest of the league members on the status of that. So we are very glad tonight to have Karen Wick with us. One of the issues that continues to pop up are the condo construction defect legislation. And so the focus of our conversation tonight is on that. And so just starting with a couple of questions out there, and I'm sure Karen will address those, but you know, we hear these questions all the time. Is there a real problem that's preventing condo construction? And if there is, how can that problem be addressed? We know that condos are an entry point for first-time home buyers, so how can that supply be increased? I just read an article this morning from the Construction Reporter that indicates that the supporters of revising the construction defect legislation have pointed out that builders remain wary of taking on condo projects because of possible litigation. While new condos comprised 25% of residential construction in 2008, as of 2020, that number had declined to 4.3%. So we know those are not being built for some reason. So Karen is with us this evening, and Karen is the principal and founder of Swift Strategies, a government relations firm in Denver. She has more than 20 years of legislative and political experience in both Colorado and DC, and has been a registered lobbyist in Colorado since 2009. Since launching Swift Strategies in 2020, Karen has built a reputation as a problem solver with a client base that allows her to work across the aisle, capitalizing on legislators' expertise and passions, and cultivating supporters for her clients' agendas. She's experienced in all phases of the legislative process and has strong relationships with legislative leadership, the governor's office, and key agencies. So on that note, Karen, I'm going to turn the conversation over to you, and I'm going to ask our attendees to make sure they're muted so we don't get any background noises. And Karen, I'm not sure, would you like questions dropped into chat while you're talking, or would you rather we wait until you're finished?
I think let's wait till we're finished. We can have a conversation. I think there's enough of us here that that would be very welcomed.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Great.
All right.
Well, and thank you so much, Trish, and thank you to all for taking time tonight to talk about this bill. It has not yet been introduced, but I thought I would start a little bit about a little background of how we even got here and why we're even talking about this again. I am, as Trish said, I'm a contract lobbyist. One of my clients and the client that I'm representing on this bill is the Colorado Association of Realtors. When the legislation, and it was Senate Bill 106 last year, which we called the right to remedy, failed on it. The House sponsor, Representative Shannon Byrd, came to me and my partner, and really said, I want to bring this issue back next year, meaning 2025, but I really want to approach it from a very different angle and a concept than what we did with Senate Bill 106, simply because that bill did not pass. And one of the things Representative Byrd really wanted to do was try to find a pathway through both sides. For so long, this issue of construction defects has been pitting home builders versus trial lawyers, and except for the thing one time in 2010 when they worked together to try and address a challenge they were finding in their litigation process in relationship to insurance and how to better consolidate insurance on it. It's really been very much oppositional. And so she asked my partner Jason Hopfer and I if we and our client, the realtors, would really take a leadership role on it, because we are a neutral party, right? Like our members, they want to sell homes and they want to sell good quality homes and they want to really help people get into starter homes or be able to have that continuum of housing from the starter home to the large family home, really be able to continue to see the movement up and down it. And that's one of the big challenges that we have been having, is that with all the multitude of issues, right, whether it is overall cost of housing, individuals feeling like they can't actually get into a home, those who have been in maybe the family home for a really long time and want to downsize because kids are moved out, that this house or condo that you might downsize to is more expensive than the home you currently live in. And so how do we bring back a very robust housing market? And so for the past several years, housing has been at the top of the agenda of the legislature. Last year, we tackled density issues and we tackled how do we increase affordable rentals. We dealt with property taxes and some of these components to really add some more affordability into the system. One of the pieces of all of that, and I think Trish, this is to your why is this even necessary to talk about, is that with all the work that we're doing, we're continuing to see a challenge in getting the stock to start getting built in the areas where we really need to have it, whether you want to call it the middle market housing, starter homes. It really is those under the median sales price homes in Colorado to help families get started, build intergenerational wealth, downsize, and be able to support their folks. So many of the things that we heard really tackling this on was the concern from many individuals of, would my kids be able to still live where I live? Could I really afford to stay here myself? And when you're seeing these challenges, I think that's part of what really motivated our client to want to get engaged. I saw some stats today that I think was really helpful to put in there, is that, you know, in the regular component of supply and demand, we know that the shortage of houses continues to increase the housing price, and that making buying a home just becomes more and more unaffordable. The median home price, and this isn't just a Colorado issue, right? Like the affordability is nationwide. The median home price nationwide is around $488,000 a home. In Denver in November, December, it's at closer to $580,000. And we know that we're seeing significant shortfalls in what is needed in cities in our area. Close to around 50,000 units are really needed. When we saw DRCOG, the Denver Region Council of Governments, they estimated about 50,000 units now, and then we'll need another 500,000 by 2050. So we know this is a problem that is not going away. One of the things in tackling this issue that was also critically important to Representative Byrd was that she firmly believes, and realtors also firmly believe, there needs to be insured quality, and that if homeowners are having a problem, they need an efficient and fast path to get the defect fixed and to have opportunities to be whole and to have homes that they can actually live in. Right? We recognize that in some cases problems do arise, and when problems are arising, we want to make sure there's a fix to it. But we also know in our conversations with home builders that what the components are going into place, the ability to actually say the juice is worth the squeeze in building this home, that it's really at the high end and the luxury where they can find any kind of margin to be able to have it reasonably be built. And I know this also not just from the for-profit side, but on the nonprofit side too. One of my clients is also Habitat for Humanity. And we usually estimate, like, our model is very different than a for-profit builder. We are right now having the basic cost of building a home is usually somewhere around 400,000. And for us to sell it into a place where it's affordability, we've got to fundraise and fill a gap to get the house closer to 250 to 300,000 to sell it. And in some cases, we're having to go up to 350,000. And part of this is workforce, part of this is supply of materials, but it's also part of the insurance that is really driving the cost. That is domino effects of what are we seeing also in the for-profit place. And builders that are in that for-profit side are not having excessive margins that they're able to gain large profits from middle market housing. It is very slim margins that are happening as they're trying to keep it at available price points. And while we do know, as we talked about, like the idea of wanting to make sure we can ensure that there is good quality housing, the risk of litigation has lately been so high that insurance, there's not as many available insurance providers or products. And when they are in the market, they're really expensive. That adds an additional cost onto the building process overall, which is making it less likely that for-profit builders are willing to enter into that space. I think Trish, you even said it, it's like most builders are saying, well, we pretty much have a guarantee of being litigated if we're building it. That doesn't mean all builders are building terrible products. It just means that the way the structure is set up right now, that it is more likely new condos coming onto the market, you're going to see claims on construction defect, and that can be from a whole host of things, of whether small code violations, the nails are not spaced in the same way, to really significant serious, the water barriers are not right in the windows and they're having leakages and mold. Like I'm not at all discounting the challenges that homeowners run up against, but we're seeing that full range. And so that when builders are really coming into this space and insurance companies are really coming into this space and saying, what's the likelihood and the risk that we're going to be going to court? There's almost a guarantee in many condo and multifamily products that you will see that litigation happening. So what we're trying to do, and Rep. Byrd has really asked in all of these components, is can we find some more common sense to bring into this place where also still raising the bar on quality, ensuring that homeowners have a path to get their products, their homes fixed, or have a path to litigation. The bill is not yet introduced. We are still working through lots of negotiations. And as the realtors, right, like we're smack in the middle, we're negotiating with the home builders, the for-profit, the nonprofit, the insurance companies to try and see if we can bring more back into the market so that there's more competition among the insurance products that are being provided. And as well as the trial lawyers and the consumers advocates overall, to see where can we find a ground of how do we adjust what is currently happening. Our current thinking on this bill, and I say it that way, is because until it's introduced, I think we're still doing a lot of our information gathering, conversations, analysis, floating out language ideas with the different parties, bringing it back, trying to see what we can take from different avenues, seeing if we can find a common ground overall. But our current thinking is that we really want to raise the bar on the first part about quality. How do you really measure and say quality is happening in the construction? For the most part, a lot of folks, you would think that whether something met code would be an indicator of quality, because that's the law, the rules that are being passed at the local level, whether that's a municipality or the county, that is really saying this is what we think is a measure for a safe and habitable home overall. But code is usually not, right? Like code becomes the floor of it all. And so we have been looking at other ways of measuring it, so that one, if you've met code, plus you've either really worked with a workforce that has gone through a full apprenticeship program. So you're really saying we have high quality contractors that are working on this project, or this is something more and more we're seeing insurance companies require when they're starting to insure products for construction defect work, is that there's a really robust third-party inspector process. So you would have the code inspectors that really happen at that city or county level, plus a third-party independent I'm losing my words for a second, inspector, come by and really try to pre-identify more problems during the building phase so they can get corrected. So that way, before it even gets to the certificate of occupancy and the house can be sold to an owner, they've really addressed some more pieces. And so we're able to then at that point in time, more assuredly say this is a high quality home on that. And then another kind of thinking in the bill is that right now, a lot of the process goes straight into, it doesn't always go straight into, but a lot of times when the product really gets fixed is when attorneys have already really come into play. And some of the motivation is to more just go through the litigation process, probably more so because that's familiar and that's what insurance is heading towards, and everything else is used to that. Like they know their check boxes to move along. We want to really require two things that are in that space. That as soon as the homeowner identifies the problem, they're working to mitigate the damage. So I think the example we've been really using is the connection on your toilet is faulty, and that's the defect, that where the tube connects into the wall and the rest of the plumbing. But the rest of the damage, the things that we want to see mitigating is the flooring getting all wet. And so that when the homeowner realizes that there's a leak at that connection point, they're doing what they can to mitigate the damage of the floor. And so to the extent that it's possible, we know sometimes it's not possible. If things are in the walls or leaking down from the roof, it may not be possible, but that the homeowner is trying to help be part of the solution in containing the damage. And I think a lot of homeowners already are, and you're really trying to solve the problem when you're confronted with it overall. So we think this is something that is happening as well. And then the second part is that there's an opportunity for repair to happen. So whether that is the builder making an offer and the homeowner accepting it, or the homeowner identifying a construction professional, not the builder, that they want to work with because maybe they've lost confidence in the builder, that they come in, then there's some kind of process for trying to get early resolution. And if all that then fails and it's not able to get there, then definitely go through the litigation process. And so it's trying to identify those points in times where we're containing risk to be able to say we're raising the bar in some of these different ways. And the more we can contain risk, the more that the insurance companies are able to come in and say, okay, this is a market that we can be viable in. And that's part of the challenge, right? Like whether it is construction insurance, or if you're even looking at, I know, homeowners insurance, mine definitely went up. We're going to be tackling wildfire issues that are going on, which is driving challenges in homeowners insurance. And it's an even bigger problem for the state. But it's those same kind of calculations that insurance companies are making on your homeowners insurance that they're making in this construction and pieces. And they're looking at the past practice of how often is litigation happening? What is the likelihood of us having to go to court versus settle? How does this happen? And that's how pricing is going on. So we're really trying to identify those ways of containing risk and then really incentivizing insurance to come back into the market. We haven't quite figured out that piece, but the governor's office has been really supportive of trying to figure out some of these solutions to be able to bring it back in. You know, we have a history in what was done around the Colorado, health insurance market to bring more insurance providers in and offer the state plan overall to try and create some more affordable options. I think some of that history might be a thing to look at as we're looking at insurance in this kind of space as well too. And then as we're moving forward overall and we're trying to figure out those next steps, part of that also is then how do we really clarify as the industry is really working on this, whether it's through the trial or the constructions, it's a lot clearer how to do all of this. We have heard stories that, for example, a lot of these construction defects, because they happen in multifamily, get done through an HOA. And we've definitely heard stories where HOAs may settle or win a verdict and receive funding, but then they don't actually spend the money to repair it and they sit it in their coffers. Then homeowners are left in that complex of having challenges to refinance or sell their homes because there's still the construction defect. They have a judgment of a construction defect. There was never a repair, and it's making harder for homeowners when they have to deal with that. And so part of our legislation that we're also really looking at is how do we really correct some things at the HOA level, and how do we ensure that when those money, like when that award really happens, that the HOA actually goes back and repairs it. So that way homeowners are made whole in these pieces, and that they're able to have safe and non-defective housing that they're living in, because we know for so many families this is their biggest expenses. So there's still a lot to get through. Our process as that we're at right now is the bill is on track. We're trying to get things finalized by next week. We have a date of introduction early February. We're in regular meetings with all the various parties in the governor's office to be able to see where we can get movement and where we can really land. I fully expect that the version we introduce will have additional negotiations and conversations. No legislation is ever perfect when it's introduced. Sometimes I wish some of my bills were, but it really gives us that opportunity to say we're here for the conversation. We really want to end in a place that we can create some movement in this part of the market. Our bill right now also, one of the things that was a challenge with 106 last year was the argument that because it affected the full entire industry, was the argument that home builders would not actually build in the areas where we need stock the most. They would just stay continuing building at the luxury high-end components where they can eke out a profit. So right now our bill is targeting what we're calling the middle market. So it's the median home price for a given county, whatever county you're building in, since a lot of these rules kind of like go on a county level, and below. And so it's going to be different, right? In Denver, that's closer to 700,000. In the mountains, like in Vail, I think it's like 1.2 million. But that's also where the need is, right? In those levels. So it's under those thresholds is where, if you are going to be building in there, then you can work under these different rules related to construction defects. I'm not sure if that'll stay. I think we're really trying to be responsive to this argument that if we make changes straight across the market, home builders are just going to continue building what they're building because that's what makes sense for their models. When what we know is we really need stock in those median prices and under. And that's what more and more we're just having it unaffordable for whether it's starter homes or downsizing homes, that we really need more stock in that area. And so we're really trying to be sensitive to that as well too. I think we have some more work to do on that overall. But this is a work in progress. I think you'll see it introduced in a few weeks. Hopefully it's a lot better. It's in a collaborative place with some of the various parties that are there. Sometimes I think the old adage, when you're in the middle of negotiation, if nobody's happy, maybe you have something good. And so I think we're trying to figure out how we can cut through it all and land in a decent place. So let me pause there, and I can definitely answer questions or talk through pieces. And I'd love to also know more about your process, and if this is one of the bills you think you're going to be recommending, and what else you all would need for that part.
All right, well, let's open it up here. Does anyone want to start the conversation with a question? Or what was maybe Kathy or Kate or Joe, our position last year with the legislation that was proposed? Were we a support?
Oh, Kate handled that if Kate wants to jump in. There were two bills last year, actually.
Yeah, there was Senate Bill 106, which came from Senator Coleman, Senator Zanzinger, and Rep. Byrd. And then I forget the number of the House bill, but that it came from Representative Parenti and Representative Bacon. And Bacon has a version. She's been in the mix as well, too. And we've been talking with her and trying to figure out if there's a way to find some collaboration between the legislation as well, too.
That was one of my questions. If you were stakeholding with with legislators that might be submitting again or introducing a different bill.
Yes, we've been spending some good quality time in conference rooms with both Rep. Bacon and Rep. Byrd.
Excellent.
And I would say it's really a commitment, both, Rep. Bacon is really coming from her bill of seeing what has happened in her community in the Green Valley Ranch area. I mean, I know the former Representative Parenti was really looking at her area up in that Weld County, Longmont, Firestone, Erie kind of spot. And I think that's where we really point to, we've got to do more on the quality side to be able to help with these components. And we think we can include that in the bill, but we're definitely talking with Rep. Bacon as she's working through her potential legislation.
Kate, do you remember where we ended up?
That's the key word, is remember. I'm a bad attendee because I should have looked it up.
If I remember from the debate, I think at least on 106, you were supportive of it.
I'm pretty sure we were. but we, last session was an incredibly busy one.
It was a long
Um,
one. It felt like 3 years.
Packed to the gills, and
Yeah.
I was on HOA as well as renters' rights and a few other things. So
Mhm.
it was definitely a tap dance.
Well, and if everyone can bear with me for just a second, I can see if I can switch to our last year's Capital Watch profile to verify
I think
our
I
positions.
think we have a spreadsheet on our
Yeah.
task force webpage. That's what I was going after.
Yeah, because we track this as well, Andrea.
Great. And while Kathy is looking for that, I can say just a little bit about our general process
Thank you,
for
Andrea.
determining the stance that we take on a bill.
Mhm.
Everything is rooted in our positions as an organization. So our starting point is to always determine whether or not we have a position that is relevant to the content of the bill, whether that's relevant in a way where the legislation is furthering our position or if it's hindering it. And of course, that would determine our support or opposed position. Likely, I think, with this type of legislation, we do have relevant positions. Our position on housing is very much focused on figuring out how to ensure that everyone has access to safe, appropriate housing. So I think the goals there are really aligned. Once we've determined that, our team, which the housing team is, made up of a lot of people that are on this call tonight, would review the legislation closely and then make a recommendation as to what our entire legislative action committee, what they would like to see them vote on. And so we'll go over a summary of the bill. The housing team will basically explain how it impacts our position and what the bill is intending to do. And then they'll give their recommended stance. And then our full committee will take a vote. And then once we've established that vote and that position, then we would go on record with the Secretary of State as to
Okay.
what we decided to do.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that.
Oh, sure.
It looks like we must have stated a monitor position
Yeah,
because it's not
It-
on our list.
I kind of recall that we were unable to fully weigh in because of parts of the bill, but I'd have to go back over the presentation that we did or what I drew up that we didn't even make. Because, there's some bills that we just can't, it's a balance of the good parts versus the bad parts. And then there's amendments and then it gets PI'd. So, any number of things can happen. I think my concerns with the construction defects focus is you mentioned that at the very end, you characterized that the developers, builders are eking out a profit. And I will take exception to that because the largest builders in Colorado are making billions of dollars in profits. And I don't see them struggling. Yes, there's a lot of litigation because yes, they build a lot of products that or after the construction defect, like you said, even if it goes through litigation and the award is made, there are shenanigans that go on with the money. But the main thing is that it does have to be quality. And I was pleased to hear the different constructions that the things that were the parts of the ladder to assure quality before it goes to litigation standards. So that was really helpful. But where do we know how to get a hold of or access data about the insurance industry and how they come up with their actuarial information that gives them the feeling that the figures that they come up with? Because I'm perplexed. I don't know how to access that information.
Yeah, I mean, if I could figure out that black box, I'd probably have a new career in some things. I would say though,
Exactly.
Kate, like I think one of the things that, yeah, builders that are building in higher end areas are making a lot of money. I think the challenge that we see is that we're not seeing the stock getting built in the areas that we actually need it. So all the money that they're producing is very much getting produced on housing that is out of reach for a lot of families in the challenges.
Right.
And that alone is not driving them to build in areas where we really need. And so we do need to have some incentivizing, for lack of a better word, because my words are not great tonight, for lack of a better word, to be able to really get more jumpstart in these pieces, right? Like you have nonprofit builders that are doing their best for going into like homes that are more in the 300, 350s, even 200s, where we really see a critical need, but you can't get enough done with just affordable nonprofit builders on that challenge. On the insurance piece, you know, it's interesting because I haven't seen that component in datas at all. I know in the wildfire space, we're expecting a bill to come from, I believe it's Rep Brown and Rep Titone, that is going to be asking insurance companies to provide homeowners with their quote wildfire score so that they can see some greater transparency and start understanding what can be done to help reduce wildfire risk as a homeowner. In this kind of industry aspect, we're just not seeing it available. It's the same thing like the car industries and some of the other components of insurance, that those data and information are not happening. We do know that since 2010, when legislation was last run, trying to create some different pathways and clarify the litigation process that both the home builders and travelers were on the same side of. Insurance company then said that they're going to have some, we'll see some tightening of the market, and we definitely did. So we have less insurance providers offering what's called a RAP policy, which is a policy for contractors that cover the contractors and all their subcontractors for their building pieces. We're seeing less availability of that product. We're seeing less insurance providers that are actually offering it. And consequently, we're seeing super high prices for it. For every unit, it is probably a modest that, at least from some of our habitat data, it can add anywhere from 25,000 to 50,000 and up per unit of insurance costs that is happening. And simply part of that is just because the supply, so to speak, of this insurance product is not available. And we don't have their algorithms and their components of how they decide of it. But when you're looking at those kind of components, I think we know that we've got to contain risk of litigation to help make it a more favorable piece without trying to sacrifice in any kind of way quality of building. It's a hard piece in the
That's the
current environment
balance,
that
yeah.
we're in. That's our balance, yeah.
Yeah, and I've heard it presented that, you know, there really is no issue with construction defects. It's just that the builders don't want to build those, they don't want to build condos, they want to build luxury. So I appreciate the way you kind of talked about that at the beginning.
Yeah, it's a hard part. Like we're definitely seeing, and one of the other things that we know in the market when we've looked at it, right, we're still seeing a lot of apartment rentals coming on in. The apartment and the condo are basically the same product. It's just a different who's the owner, right? And in an apartment area, if there are any kind of defects that are happening because there's an owner, they follow the contract with their builder to remedy any kind of issues. And you rarely do go into this big litigation component, mostly because you don't have a class action. You have a contract that's controlling it. That's the same product as a condo. So it's not, I think as we've been looking at the market, we know it's not necessarily that builders are terrible, because when they build apartments, there doesn't seem to be as many issues as when they're building condos. Now, that's not to say that there aren't issues, and there's not to say that homeowners aren't running across it in a different kind of aspect of it. Like, I think we recognize all of that, but I think there's some indicators that we see out there that there's another factor at play that is contributing to the challenges. It's not the whole challenge. It's not the only problem. It's not the only reason, but it's a contributing factor. And as we've been chipping away at things at the state level in some pieces, this still feels like an area that needs to be addressed and another solution identified to see if we can make some improvements and see some product being produced.
There used to be a provision for converting apartments, new builds, for instance, to condos after I believe it used to be 7 years. They could, decide to be condominiumized, buy out the developer, blah, blah, blah. But, and I thought this was a really good paradigm for when we were coming out of the recession and commercial paper was so difficult to come by for the builders. And so these large deep pocket interests had the funding to be able to fund a large apartment complex, whether it was downtown or on a rail line or what have you. And I thought, well, this is great. You're getting inventory, you're getting housing for people, and in 7 years, people can start deciding if they want to take it on, as a condo, convert it to condos. So
I
don't know.
think, yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's still a few hurdles in that area. I know that if a condo, if an apartment building is being converted and it's still under the statute of repose, right? The timeline, you have
Right.
to bring a construction defects claim. And I know this because Habitat affiliate is having to go through this right now. They were able to fundraise and purchase a building where it is 6 years old, and so it's under that statute of repose. They still need to buy construction defect wrap policy insurance, as they are not doing a single lick of construction or work or anything else, but because they're turning around, purchasing this building, this newer building, and then reselling it, they're had to do an insurance policy of somewhere around $1 million, just to be able to flip something. And they're planning to sell each condo, and they're like small, it's workforce housing, right, for their teachers and their doctors that are up in the mountain areas. They're trying to sell it for close to 350 to maybe 450,000, in that range, for these apartments that were once apartments, but because it's still within the statute of repose, they have to buy the wrap insurance, even though they're doing no work, right? They're not even updating things. They're just flipping it. And so I think some of those conundrums are still a challenge, right? So it's been a really hard and complex problem as we're looking at all of these things. But one of the things that I think for the realtors was also really compelling on this issue is, last year we passed a lot of housing policy bills. Transit-oriented communities is definitely one that comes to mind, as we're really looking at density issues and trying to build in smart ways. If we're not finding ways to create more opportunities for home ownership, all of that development that's encouraged in that legislation is going to be rental. And I'm not sure we really want to be in a place of having to be a rental state. I think the dream and the desire of home ownership is still very much real, and that's what becomes a strong sense of financial security over time. For many families, that's the start of your intergenerational wealth that you build. And so for us, as we were really looking at it, it was a lot of heartburn to say, like, we totally supported these ideas around transit-oriented communities, but the idea that if we don't do more to make sure it's a mix and it's not just all rental is something that we really took to heart.
So Karen, is Colorado in a unique situation with this condo defect? I mean,
Our laws are definitely different than other states, that they have it. And some of the ideas that we've been having, we have been drawing from other states, right? Like Texas and California, there has both been pieces of their laws that we have drawn from to see, is this an alternative to what we have on our books? Colorado is definitely every state is a unique special snowflake, I think, sometimes in legislation, and this is no exception. I don't think that there's any one state that has a gold standard or the right way of doing it, because so much of it is set on the context of these other components of its life. We have the way that we've been doing it. It has pros and cons. It has things that are better than other states and things that we can learn from other states. And so we have been looking at that nationwide. What's something that's different about Colorado from other places, and what can we learn from?
Does the insurance industry have anything they offer? Because when I think of like health insurance or auto insurance, so many of these companies are nationwide. So are the companies offering this insurance in Colorado national companies that
You
are
know, a
doing
lot
it?
of them are ones that work in more than one state. Um, I think another challenge, there's just not enough. Many left the market after 2010. And we're just not seeing in the same way a robust insurance market in this space for construction defects, wrap policies. There's just not enough of them to be able to make a piece. You know, when we've asked insurance, well, what would it take you to get back into this market? They they say things that we just aren't going to fly in some kind of areas of either get rid of the 2010 legislation or have a 3-year statute of repose, and like these things that we know are not going to be valuable for homeowners or for builders. And in some ways, what it will really do is they're trying to eliminate risk so that they feel that they can compete in this area overall. And that's kind of been a challenge. I think we've really been working to see what we can compel out of the insurance and agents industry overall in this space. I don't think we're done on it, but it's been a work in progress on that part too.
Kate, did I see your hand up?
Ed, one thing I read in one report out of a think tank in Boulder was that Colorado there's only one state with less statute of limitations for bringing in action, number one, and number two, which is one of the areas of risk of litigation. And the other area is in the amount of repose. And last year's bill was increasing that amount by a considerable number of years compared to what we are now. Right now, there's only 4 states that have the same as us or less. And we're one of the most builder-friendly, statutory, regulatory, Wild West, you name it, states in the 50 states. So, you know, compared to some of these other states that have higher standards or higher safeguards and guardrails for construction defects, they're building just fine. You know, they're not having problems.
Yeah, I
building.
haven't read that report to really be able to effectively comment on it. I know from the Common Sense Institute and Peter Lafari, who has been, I think he's been well received by both sides in this issue overall as a critical thinker, and he runs Maker Family Housing, so affordable housing and pieces has really also analyzed the issue and really identified that there are changes to be made to be able to go help it, and that it's some of these points of data are points of data and not really tell a full complete picture of all the components that go into it. And so I think it's an interesting study to be able to have, and it's an interesting piece in time, but I'm not sure any of it really fully captures what happens on the ground in our pieces. And the results are still where we are with a very lack of housing in a very critical area where we need it.
Thank you.
Other questions, comments?
Karen, I'm curious, you mentioned that you were working with consumer advocates. I was wondering if you could talk about who you're working with on this.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly believe that the trial lawyers are consumer advocates, right? That's a lot of their roles in those pieces. And we have seen legislation change because of work that they have done on a lot of different areas. So we have been working a lot from representatives of the trial bar, of the attorneys that are really working in this space. We've shared the bill in various drafts as it's come out with different groups and are always eliciting feedback. But it's been a lot of the conversations through the trial bar. Right, we're sort of, we know at the end of the day, a lot of the change is going to happen between these three parties as we're trying to find our way through it. And so we're trying to work as closely with them as we can.
Okay, well, that helps us understand a little bit more, Karen. So I guess we'll just stay tuned for the
Please
bill.
do. I'm hoping that we'll have an introduced version next week. Please do reach out. Trish has my email. We're happy to provide feedback and information. Once we land somewhere that it feels a little more solid and not moving, we will be putting together a fact sheet. There's been a lot of updates and changes. We haven't wanted to spend our time redoing a fact sheet multiple times, but we will be having that opportunity for further conversation and discussion as we go up. So as you're digging into this issue and looking at it, please don't hesitate to reach out.
It'd be great to get a fact sheet as soon as it's ready.
As soon as we finalize where we are, I'm going to work on that next.
Yeah,
It would also be great to maybe, if it's not too hard, to compile a list of some of your major resources that you've been looking at for data.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll cite the fact sheet and some components and pieces. We haven't
Okay.
quite gotten there yet.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your time. I greatly appreciate the invitation. I know Rep Byrd had hoped to be able to join you, and unfortunately, I think JBC is taking all of her time. But thank you for the opportunity to allow us to be able to talk to you all.
well, and I thank Jason I think he must have communicated with you, Karen.
Yes, he
because-
did. I think he's coming to talk to you about on behalf of Excel in a few weeks. And so he's like, would you do this one so they don't get tired of me? And I was like, I'll be happy to.
Well, I sure appreciated the connection and I appreciated your reaching out, Karen. So now that
Definitely.
we've made the connection, we'll stay in touch.
All right. Have a wonderful
All
evening.
right. Very good.
Bye-bye.
Thanks so much. Yeah. Bye-bye.